to it. General Morrison really has been in command there since August 2016 at the Cyber Center of Excellence, commanded as well the 7th Signal Command and also Commanding General of NETCOM. He has been a tremendous supporter of AFCEA, but more importantly, an inspiration to us that our mission matters, that we can help support his task and the Army's mission as we do the other services. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to welcome, not to the stage, because he's all mic'd up and is going to wander around, but I'd like you to welcome with me General Morrison to our presentation this morning.
Sir, thank you. Good morning. So, remarkable speaker. I'm not sure about that, but you can grade me when we're all done. Fair enough? First off, it is an honor to be here this morning and to quite frankly see a lot of old friends and get a chance to talk to you a little bit about what's happened at the Cyber Center of Excellence, what's happening inside the Army, and quite frankly, what we're doing for our joint force. And so this is a defensive cyber discussion, but I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of what my responsibilities are. So I am the proponent inside the Army for the development of cyberspace capabilities, electronic warfare capabilities, most of the network capabilities, but I'm also responsible for the training and education of our officers, warrant officers, enlisted, and civilians, because, as we all know, our civilian workforce is absolutely critical to our cyber mission force. From an Army perspective, all of our teams that we were directed to build as a part of the cyber mission force are now FOC. We have stood up a branch, which is different from how the other services have approached it. So we have a dedicated section of our force that does nothing but cyberspace operations, our 17 series. We've established a school so that we can actually train and educate our cyber operators, and we do describe them as cyber operators. That school is at its initial operating capability. That's mainly because we lack some of the facilities that we need to really do some of the classified training. But we are training all 3 cohorts. So officer, warrant officer, and enlisted at the entry level, which is key. So we're taking young talent off of the streets, training and educating them, and we are now producing 17 Charlies. And then that is pretty unique in itself. Now, we are having great success in attracting the talent. I get asked all the time, how are we doing on recruiting? We're doing very, very, very well. Things that we're going to need to work, though, is not only once we recruit folks into the force, we're spending a lot of money and a lot of time to provide very, very high-end training. The key is going to be how do we retain folks. And we've got various initiatives that we've got ongoing in that space that I'll talk about in just a second. But what I want to talk about is how we're leveraging cyberspace, something that is very malleable, that is an operational domain, that challenge the bureaucracy. And the first part of it is from the requirement side. So if we follow the traditional requirements process, it takes, and I'll probably be off a little bit here, but from the time a document is written to the time it is staffed and approved through all the formal processes, roughly around 574 days. And you'll get varying numbers depending on who you talk to. But my point is, if it takes 574 days to get a requirement approved in cyberspace, you're done before you start. It is a fool's errand. It will not work in a dynamic battle space like the cyber domain. And so in defensive cyber, with some great work from our acquisition teammates, we're leveraging a model called the IT box. And this IT box construct has actually been around for about 10 years. But we've never really operationalized it. So I'm going to give you an anecdote, and this is factual. You write a broad, overarching document saying, I need defensive cyber capabilities. And then underneath that, you nest maybe some of the particular things. And an example I'll give you is that we wanted to sense a cyber capability on our installation networks. We want a deployable capability. And you refine based off of those incremental pieces. So, 574 days. We got an ISICD, that initial capabilities document, approved in December. We got the first 2 increments of those discrete capabilities that we wanted approved through the process in February. The initial prototypes have already showed up in our Cyber Protection Brigade down at Fort Gordon. And we'll now go into a DevOps cycle, and by June, we're making a decision on whether or not to field that kit to our Cyber Protection Brigade. That is moving with some speed inside cyberspace. And the key is, it never ever stops. It is incremental improvements that we continue to spin into these capabilities, and just as importantly, when we don't need a capability, we spin it out. Because that's the only way that we're going to be able to do capabilities development in such a dynamic environment where, quite frankly, our adversaries don't need to follow the JSIDS process. And it's working. And we're going to apply that same model on the offensive side, and we're going to apply that same model to the defensive cyber capabilities that we put inside of our tactical formations. Ever changing, ever evolving. So if you're doing capability development that's like that, you're going to have a training model that can keep up with that. Because the two must go hand in hand. It has got to be a comprehensive approach. And so inside the cyber school, we have developed a curriculum now that trains a cyber operator. Not an offensive cyber operator, not a defensive cyber operator, a cyber operator. You don't train an infantryman to go on the attack only, right? You train an infantryman who can do defense and offense and can adapt to whatever situation they're put into. That's the same construct we're taking with our cyber operators. And that approach, that common cyber technical core, has now become the joint standard. And we are now pushing that out to all the rest of the services so they can implement it as well. The second piece of training in this environment is it is not training like we've done in the past. So it's not buttonology. That's not going to work in this space. Just hitting a button and not understanding why, and it just being green, and then it goes red and you don't know what to do about it, that's not the kind of operator we need. So training now is really about learning-based outcomes. We want to educate folks so that when we throw something at them, no matter what that box looks like, they can figure it out. And that is a completely different model than, quite frankly, in the Army than we're used to. And then just as important, you've got to be able to adjust that curriculum based off of what's happening in the environment. You know, General Wood talked a little bit about what's happening down at Fort Gordon. I would submit to you the single biggest thing that's happening at Fort Gordon is not that we're growing cyber capability. It is the co-location of the operational force with the institutional force that's required to do the capability development and training for them. Because what that has enabled us to do is establish this linkage between the schoolhouse and the operational force that would have been a hoot if I had fallen backwards while I was walking. Y'all got to work with me, laugh a little bit. But that synergy is just absolutely tremendous. So think about it. Our training developers are embedded in the operational force. When they see something happen, the enemy changes a technique or something that they're doing, or we see a new capability, that almost immediately transcends back into our curriculum for us to go ahead and adjust it. We're able to bring operators into the schoolhouse and teach what our adversaries are doing. That synergy is absolutely critical. Our capability developers are watching operations every single day. And then you get into that DevOps cycle. So it's the linkage of changing the way that we do things. Education, not training. Learning-based outcomes, not task condition standards like we've always done in the past. Thinking operators that are able to be put into any environment and then adjust to it. Capabilities that are set and baselined and then rapidly reiterate based off of what's happening in the operational environment. And then bringing all that together so you build operational capability in unison. And then that strong, strong linkage between the operational force and the institutional force. So the information is going back and forth each way, and you are rapidly adjusting your curriculum and what you're educating based off of what's happening in the operational environment. So I'm going to stop there, and hopefully we can get a dialogue going. And I look forward to answering any questions that you may have. And since I'm stopping early, please don't leave me standing here for 20 minutes.
Thank you, sir. First question. Some industry partners have heard that the Army has decided to take a strategic pause with regard to JRSS deployment. Can you confirm and elaborate on why and the timeline when the Army expects to resume migrations?
So I can't talk about the timeline. We will talk about as there are concerns that as we have added users behind the architecture about the quality of service. And I don't know about the strategic pause. I have not heard that officially myself. I did have a discussion with General Baker, who's the NETCOM commander, the other day. And he was sort of laying out for me some of the challenges that are ongoing. And whether or not we take that formal strategic pause or not, I am not sure yet, but I can get you an answer.
Thank you. Next question. How is the integration of information warfare and ground-based electronic warfare into cross-functional teams going?
So that is a great question. So the Army is taking a hard look at all things inside the information environment. And to that end, we know that we are not quite right yet. So we have not really done the integration, especially from a proponent level, on bringing together cyber, electronic warfare, and then all things information. And so General Lundy, who's the Combined Arms Commander, told myself and some of the other key stakeholders, to include General Mingus out the Mission Command Center of Excellence, to start doing some mission analysis on how we would bring that all together. Now, what I would tell you is the Army is bringing electronic warfare into cyber. That will be official as of 1 October of this year. And so our electronic warfare professionals will now be cyber operators. And then they will go get additional training on top of that that relates specifically to the electromagnetic spectrum. And so the electronic warfare school out at Fort Sill actually is a component of the cyber school even today. So that portion of it, we're well on our way. In terms of capability development for that, we don't really have a cross-functional team that has stood up for cyber and electronic warfare. And I'm not sure that we need one, and I'll explain why I say that. It's a very unique relationship with Army Cyber, who's the operational arm of cyber, and the Cyber Center of Excellence. You know, most proponents, if I put my signal hat on, I deal with many commands from a proponent perspective. ForceCom, the Army Service Component Commands overseas. But in cyber, it's one-to-one. It is formerly General Nakasone is our cyber CG, now soon to be Major General Promoter Fogarty, and then myself. And so that relationship allows some synergy that you just don't get with a normal proponency. The operational user is very clear to me. The person setting operational priorities is very clear. And so we're able to spin that DevOps cycle that I alluded to with defensive cyber operations. We're able to spin fairly effectively. It literally is a cross-functional team approach, but we don't need to formalize it as a cross-functional team because it is very clear how we're aligned inside the Army, and the synergy is absolutely tremendous. Bringing information warfare or information ops or information dominance into that is an operational imperative. You can just watch the news and see what some of our adversaries are doing, and they clearly understand inform and influence. We need to operationally and from a proponent's perspective bring all that into alignment, and that's what we're working towards. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, sir. Can you touch on the role of a cyber operator versus an EWO, and is that changing for the Army?
Yeah, it's absolutely changing. Now, they're complementary. You cannot look at electronic warfare professionals and cyber operators in isolation. So the way that we're transforming our electronic warfare professionals is they will become cyber operators. They will be the face inside our brigade combat teams and our maneuver formations for cyber operational planning. So we're going to do this two ways. The first part of it is our current EWO workforce is going through a series of mobile training teams that are teaching them how to do planning in the cyber domain. That's phase one, and that's what will take effect by 1 October. After that, anybody that enters into our electronic warfare workforce, our cyber workforce, will first go through cyber training at Fort Gordon, and then we will move them off to do training for specifically conducting operations in and through the electromagnetic spectrum. And again, that is so that we are actually putting cyber operators into our maneuver formations to assist with that kind of planning. And then that will also give us a bigger bench of which we can grow folks that can then move into the cyber mission force. Think of it as akin to we have our traditional SOF in USASOC, and then you have your very, very high-end SOF that is in JSOC. It's sort of that model that we're putting into place. We'll have tactical cyber operators that will glow, and then the very, very, very best will move into the cyber mission force. I hope that answers your question, sir.
Thank you. What is the status of the air component of electronic warfare in the JROC process?
Yes. So you got to love some of the questions you get. Right now, we have gotten, through the Army, approval for our multifunctional electronic warfare air CDD. It is through the 1 and 2 star level inside the JROC, and I anticipate approval anytime here in the near future. It's not only the air component that we're working on, we've also got the ground component that has also been approved, and then through a series of ONSs, primarily coming out of Europe, we are already doing capability development so that we can go ahead and assess capabilities and get a sense that do we have our requirements right or not. You know, a fundamental shift that is happening inside the Army is instead of writing a requirement document and then having it sit on the table for 10 years and you're wondering if it's right while you throw it over the fence to your acquisition teammates and they're trying to build something, is we're really trying to do experimentation and demonstration in an operational environment that informs our requirements. And sometimes what is available is good enough. And in the case of electronic warfare, where the Army, for all the right reasons, divested itself of its electronic warfare capabilities while we focused on a counter-IED fight, when you have nothing, just about anything, and I'm being a little pejorative, but just about anything is better. And so this learning by doing, informing our requirements, adjusting our requirements when we find out what's really in the art of the possible, and then rapidly spinning it into the force is absolutely key. And the thing that we're working on now, we had a discussion with the ForceCom CG, is it's more than just you've heard a lot about our cross-functional teams. It's more than just prototyping capabilities. It cannot just be materiel. It's got to be across the entire .mil PF. And so we are now getting into a mode where we are prototyping organizational constructs. We're prototyping concepts so that we make sure that we do things the right way. And what the ForceCom CG has asked us to do is, with some of this ONS work, come back in and align out the next phase, how we would align an organizational construct against that so we can prototype that as well, so that as we grow the EW force in the future, and we will, that we do it in a smart and efficient and effective way. I hope that answers your question.
how are you interfacing with the other services to ensure that there is consistency with training? And also, is there a consistent certification process for your cybersecurity and signal training staff?
So I'm going to come back to the joint piece in a second. The beauty of how we grew the Cyber Mission Force, I think it's something that the Department of Defense got right. Because up front, Cybercom set very stringent certification standards that all the services had to train towards, so that you had commonality no matter how you mixed and matched organizations. And so that is absolutely key. So it's interesting because we just had an Army inspection of our cyber school, and we literally had to sort of walk them through because the Army wants to do things in a green way. But that's not how the cyber school operates. The cyber school operates in a purple environment. And when you walk over to the cyber school, you're going to see soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and civilians. Because if we have a seat open, we are offering it to the joint force. Because we are all training to the same standard. And so literally it's about throughput. I mean, where can you get a seat? We have folks that, quite frankly, on the electronic warfare side, we're sending out to Goodfellow Air Force Base because they're being trained to a certain standard. And so that's really what you want to make sure that is in place. And it allows for really quite frankly, allows for effectiveness and efficiency. And so that is absolutely critical as we move this thing forward, because when you take a look at how you operate in the cyberspace domain, even today, you have Air Force teams operating besides Army teams under a Navy commander if you go out to the Pacific. Everybody's got to be trained to the same standard with a commonality of lingo, et cetera. And I think that's one of the things that the department did very, very well as we stood up the Cyber Mission Force. How do we interface with the other services? We do it through a variety of ways. One, we do it through some formal processes up at the Cybercom, especially under the J7 side. I do a lot of interaction with my peers inside each one of the other services. More importantly, our school commandant, who runs the school each and every day, does it on a routine basis. Sharing lessons learned, sharing changes in curriculum, sharing best practices, because we are all in this together. It's not as tight as I would like it, quite frankly. I mean, there's some decisions that we're going to need to make as a joint force on how we're actually going to train. Are we going to identify service leads to conduct training for all services as an executive agent? Are we going to establish leads where you just develop the curriculum and you push it out to the other services? There's ways that we can get about that, and I think that's really the next step in our maturity.
Thank you. How can universities and other academia help your mission, and does your command dialogue with them?
Yeah, so it's interesting. General Hernandez is in the audience, and he's up at the Army Cyber Institute. We do a tremendous amount of dialogue with universities. We have MOAs with it's either 10 or 11 universities and more in the works, because we all have the same challenge. Whether you're in industry, academia, or in the DoD, cybersecurity and defensive cyber is everybody's business. And so sharing lessons learned and best practices is absolutely key. Sharing knowledge is absolutely key. So having our instructors be able to dialogue with real education professionals as we move from a training environment to an education model is key, because that's not something traditionally inside the military that we do. And so it is very, very important. We also, AFCEA helps us out every January with the Cyber Education, Research, and Training Symposium. We did our first one, had about 350 folks attend, but it is specifically designed to do outreach to academia and our industry partners to talk about education, research, and training. Because we all, and literally it is an information exchange where everybody just sort of goes open kimono and they talk about the challenges they're having with retention and recruiting. They talk about differences in the training models, education models, and then things that we can all do collectively together to make ourselves better. And so I will make a little bit of an advertisement, if that's all right, General Wood. We're going to do it again this January because it was very, very successful. But it is a venue that is really meant to bring together folks so we can have a professional, candid dialogue.
Thank you, General. Next question. Should an organization have the discretion to not share what an adversary is doing on the DODN or in their own network?
I'm not quite sure of the context of the question. I'm not quite sure of the context of the question. I will put it into an operational context based off of my own experience. There were times where we knew an adversary was doing something on the network where we would not go out and disclose it nor heal it, right? Because we wanted to keep an eye on what the adversary was doing. So what I would submit to you is it depends on what's happening operationally, how you would approach that. You may or may not want to disclose it because you may want to be watching what is going on so you can learn. Make sure that you put the mitigation on a broad impact all the way across the network. And then more importantly, you can gain intelligence, which does happen on blue networks just as well as out in gray and red space. I'm not sure if I answered the question or not, but.
Thank you. What do you see as the impact on industry with the proposed institutional changes that will impact C3 to enhance both continuity of operations and mobility?
Yeah, so I see nothing but opportunity. You're watching the Army in an immense time of change, and it is literally being led from the top. But you're seeing the stand-up of Army Futures Command. You're seeing an attack on the permafrost and the old ways of doing business so that we put the capabilities into the hands of our soldiers that are needed in a timely manner so those capabilities are relevant and they allow us to operate in a contested and congested environment against a near-peer threat. Plain and simple. And so as you take a look at that, we'll use this IT box methodology that I talked about. So it is a 3 to 5 year sprint. That's the length of the program because, it's a fool's errand for us to sit there and think we know what defensive cyber capabilities we want in 5 to 10 years. I don't even know what my phone's going to look like in 5 to 10 years. I can't even imagine it. And so it's a 3 to 5 year sprint. That means competition. That means different capabilities coming in at different periods of time. And we will field those capabilities across as much of the Army as we possibly can, within reason, but it doesn't mean that everybody in the Army is going to get everything. It's a completely different model. And so, as that translates back to industry is absolutely critical. Because what we're looking to do is not develop our own capabilities, except for a military unique application. There's been an explosion, especially in IT, inside industry. There is no way, zero way, any of the services can keep up, nor should we. We should harness that innovation and then figure out how we feed it into the force. So you will hear a lot about the Army talking about adapt and buy. Let's look what's out there, what is proven joint, soft industry, adapt it to an Army, in this case, Army application, and then rapidly get it into the hands of soldiers so we can inform ourselves and then make an informed decision that we want to field something. When you take a look at WIN-T, that requirements document was written when some of you folks sitting in the were majors, right? How in the world do you know that far back what it is you want to be fielded in 2018? And the answer is you don't. And so significant change undergoing, and we're going to make informed decisions based off informed requirements with soldier and leader feedback being central to everything that we're absolutely doing. And inside the schoolhouse, that flips all the way around to our education. Because the same model. We have soldiers go through the training, and quite frankly, when they get to their operational unit, they're providing us straight feedback on, you didn't teach me this. I need you to adjust the curriculum to account for this. And so it's a fascinating time to be inside our Army. A lot of change ongoing that's going to translate into nothing but opportunities for industry.
Sir, you spoke about the officer, warrant officer, and enlisted cohorts. How do government civilians fit into the Army's cyber operation construct?
Yeah, so that we talked about recruiting folks coming in. On the military side, we're doing very, very well. We're not having a problem attracting talent. But when you take a look at our cyber mission teams, every single one of them has a significant civilian component to it. And when you take a look at Army Cyber Command and my headquarters writ large, over half is actually civilian. And so our civilian teammates are an integral part of the cyber mission force and the cyber forces inside the Army. And so if you go into the schoolhouse, they are held to the same training certifications, education certifications, that our soldiers are. They sit side by side and go through the same level of training. And if they don't come out, just like our military teammates, if they don't come out on the back end achieving the standard to which they need to, they don't become cyber operators. And so absolutely integrated into everything that we're doing from an operational perspective, absolutely critical to what we're doing, but also my biggest concern in terms of recruitment. Because unlike our military teammates, in all candor, our civilian teammates have a choice on where they work, and they have a choice on who they work for. And so there's a lot of competition out there, especially with our industry partners, for the same talent. And so building in the right recruitment models for our civilian teammates, much like we have on the military side, is going to be absolutely critical to us moving forward.
In your third hat as the senior commander at Fort Gordon, how do you think the community is ready for the arrival of our cyber and all of the personnel requirements?
Yeah, so I've noticed on the screen you guys are getting nothing but my big ugly mug. I wish I had a hat to cover it. So I will tell you, so this is my fourth time being stationed at Fort Gordon. 2 times for school, and then I was fortunate enough to be the 7th Signal Commander just 5 years ago, and now back as a senior commander. The difference between when I was here in 7th Sig and the difference today is it's night and day. The linkage between the community, between the state, and what's happening at Fort Gordon is absolutely tremendous. And just for everybody's edification, so the Army is putting almost $2 billion worth of investment into Fort Gordon. You've got the Army Cyber Command Complex, which is being built over on the NSA Georgia compound right now. It'll be open for business in 2020, and that's when Army Cyber will move down. We're putting another $900-ish million into the educational facilities, so we can get rid of a whole bunch of buildings that were built in the 60s that just are not ready for the 21st century. They will all be skiffed so that we can have world-class facilities, world-class education that produces the world's best operators. And so the surrounding community is really buying into all this growth. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We did our groundbreaking for Gate 6 the other day, a $30 million investment by the state to do all the infrastructure outside of the gate to account for the increased capacity. Downtown, Augusta University has one of the NSA certified educational curriculums. They are standing up a cyber innovation building that will open in July that's absolutely gorgeous. That government, industry, academia, and the military will all have a presence in so that we can be sharing ideas. So there's just a significant investment that is ongoing. And then most importantly, we are really focusing on education inside the region. Because the folks that we're trying to attract, especially our civilian teammates and our contractor teammates, they want a place that they can raise their families. And we're starting to see a change. Quite frankly, when you take a look at how the schools in the area have done over the course of time, you're starting to see an uptick. We from the Post have assigned a brigade to be a technical mentor, for lack of a better term, with every high school in the region so we can start establishing that connective tissue. But I'm very excited for what's happening in the central Savannah River area. And I really can't wait to see it in 10 years. It's going to be just a completely different place.
Sir, do you feel the Army's operational commanders are learning to use new SEMA doctrine and capabilities?
Yeah, I absolutely do. So the Army's gone to a new operational concept called multi-domain battle. We're moving in that direction. The reality of it is we've probably been doing it forever. We're just not doing it at the speed of cyber. And we really haven't formally inculcated it into all of our doctrine, but we're very definitely moving in that environment. But operational commanders, as we've transitioned back to understanding how to operate in a contested and congested environment against a near-peer threat, clearly understand the importance of the cyber domain to include the electromagnetic spectrum. And there's been a lot of analysis going on about some of the folks that are out there that you can read in the papers about how they're conducting operations. And quite frankly, right now, we've got some work to do, bringing that back into our operational formations. It's really not the senior level. It's really making sure that everybody, all the way down to the lowest level, understands how to operate in a contested and congested environment. It's been a long time since any signal officer has had to deal with somebody actually jamming them. I mean, in all candor, you got to go back to almost when I was a captain to where we trained that on a regular basis. So revitalizing that at the lowest levels is really where we're starting to focus our efforts. And what you're seeing us put in place at the combat training centers, at Fort Irwin and at JRTC, and then over in Europe at JMRC, is literally putting world-class capabilities into the hands of our OPFOR so that they can create that contested and congested environment so that from the ground up, we start figuring out how to operate in that. The next step is making sure we put that capability at our home stations and at our installations, because that's where the real training is going to take place. You don't necessarily want to wait till you get all the way to a CTC to actually replicate that environment. I will also sit there and say that to all of our incoming two-star commanders, we actually walk through an operational vignette, spend a couple days doing it, and one of my jobs is to actually lead the discussion on how do you operate in a contested and congested environment. And we also do that at the BCT level, and so we are starting to get it in there, but again, it's that lower portion that we really got to focus on it, because everybody's a sensor inside cyberspace in the electromagnetic spectrum.
Thank you, sir. We have time for two more questions. The first one, what role do you see the Army Reserve and the National Guard playing in national cyber defense in the future? And will their certifications and training be commensurate with the active forces?
Yeah, I'll do the last one first. There can be absolutely no difference in the training that we provide our active component and our reserve component teammates. Can't be any difference. The capability that the Army provides in cyberspace, whether active, reserve, or National Guard, needs to be the same. And so to that point, the Army is a total force. And so we are building capacity in both the reserve components. We are in the process of standing up a cyber protection brigade inside the 335th Signal Command Theater. That is in process. And we are standing up teams that will support each one of the states as well. And to that end, the cyber school is actually sending out mobile training teams, because we're responsible for maintaining those training certifications and standards. And we do it in bite-sized pieces, because it's very, very difficult for our reserve component teammates to take a year off to go through the extensive training that we put them through. So we do it in 3 phases. Each one builds upon the other, and we put them sort of center mass geographically so that we limit the burdens on both fiscally and personally on our reserve component teammates. But the Army is a total force. They are absolutely integral to the capacity that we're building.
Can you please talk about 2018 funding? Are O&M dollars flowing to your level, and is there additional funding for UFRs flowing? If so, what are some of your UFR priorities, and how do you anticipate executing them?
Yeah, so I'm going to sort of flip the question around a little bit. So I don't worry a whole lot about funding. In all candor, the Army has made a tremendous investment into building cyber capacity. And so when we have something that is a need, we generally get that need fulfilled. And quite frankly, I talked a little bit about being able to change our curriculum and how we educate based off of the changing environment. I've been given broad latitude by my bosses that if an operational need dictates a change in training, execute the change in training and have the bureaucracy catch up on the back end. The Army's commitment to what we're doing inside cyberspace is, from my perspective, superb. And senior leaders are really pushing to not only maintain the momentum that we have, but quite frankly, continue to refine the capability we have so that we can continue to adapt in an ever-changing environment. And has allowed us to push the envelope in both capability development and the way that we train our workforce. And so I feel very comfortable with the level of support that we get from the Army. And quite frankly, anytime that we've had a need, the senior leaders have always come through.
Thank you, sir. That was our final question.